small introduction of the guest speaker today. So, hello everyone. Our guest speaker today is Mrs. Jaspreet Kaur Layal. Ms. Layal is currently assistant professor at Center for German Studies, School of Language, Literature and Culture Studies, Central University of Gujarat, Gandhinagar. She has keen interest. She has studied German literature from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and Miss Lair has keen interest in children and youth literature and has written articles in this field in the journal German Studies in India. She has also translated Vishnu Prabhakar's short story Mera Beta into German. He is a Hindi writer. As a part of a translation project being run by the Department of German, University of Mumbai. Her interests lie in dramatic, creative writing, reading, traveling, and photography. Today, she is going to deliver a lecture on the topic Art and Architecture in German-speaking countries. So now I would like to invite the guest speaker to deliver the lecture. Unfortunately, we won't be able to have a visual, like we won't be able to see her. But since she has some issue with the camera, so okay, Jaspreet, over to you. You can begin your presentation. It's very nice to have you here.
Thank you, Aarti. Thank you so much for this very kind and warm welcome on board. And also a big thanks to you for inviting me over and for this very interesting, very warmly put together introduction. Yes, I hope I'm audible to everybody. I hope
Yes.
I'm audible to everybody. All right. Today, after having spoken to Aarti, we decided that we can conduct a lecture. I would not really call it a lecture. It is like an interactive, PPT presentation that I was able to put together. Considering that, my interest also lies in a bit of art, and of which architecture is an important part. And so I thought of, putting up something together for you people regarding architecture in Germany. Now, Germany, for that matter, the entire Europe, for that matter, I would say I hope we all are aware that, it is one wonderful place to visit and to experience old and new architecture firsthand. And speaking about Germany, yes, it is a repertoire of old architecture, of medieval architecture, and also of the new designs, the contemporary architecture that one can think of, the most modern buildings, and at the same time, the way they have, managed to maintain their heritage over the centuries, and they have managed to maintain the old buildings that were once upon a time built according to the then architectural forms. Now, to begin with, I shall be taking you through the journey of German architecture, starting with Romanesque, and I will take you through and through up till neoclassical architecture. Uh, Aarti, there is some disturbance coming, some noises are coming. Can that be muted?
Okay, okay. Maybe from my side, I'll mute.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah. So I shall be taking you through this architectural designs journey from Romanesque up till neoclassical. Romanesque, first of all, to begin with, as the name suggests, it is pretty much evident. It is a form of architecture that emerged in Europe during the Dark Ages. Aarti, there is,
Just wanted to interfere for a second.
yeah.
Could you make it full screen, your PPT? It will be much more Visual will be
I
more effective. You, if you
well,
go
I
to three dots,
okay, yeah, I'm
enter full
here now.
screen. Enter full screen.
Enter full screen. Okay, okay,
Yeah,
okay,
this is
okay.
good.
So,
Thank
is it
you.
better? Is it better? Okay, yeah, great. It is. I can see it in full screen also. So I guess now we are fine.
Okay.
Okay. Now, so Romanesque. First of all, as the name is pretty suggestive, you can take a look at it. It has to be connected with the Roman era. Romanesque is a form of architecture that emerged in Europe during the Middle Ages. And when we talk about the Middle Ages, we talk about the Dark Ages. It is a time period that spreads between 500 to 1500 AD, right? It is a term that is used, to refer to a time between that falls between the fall of the Roman Empire and the beginning of the Italian Renaissance and the Age of Discovery. And the Dark Ages, it is also, and it is a time when the world, for that matter, did not have much of scientific discovery at that time. And it was also about the time when economy was at its lowest possible in Europe at that, and due to which the society was also lacking behind a lot in every possible sphere of life, be it the livelihood of people, be it the standard of living of people, be it education, be it any kind of scientific attitude that could have been developed amongst people, and that also reflected in the kind of houses and buildings that were erected at that time. Now, so the and to begin with, let us also be very clear about the fact that this was also the time when religion was very strongly institutionalized. Church was an institution that was all powerful, and it controlled the lives of people, and therefore when we talk about art, and specifically when we talk about architecture, we cannot forget that it was all completely centered on places of religious worship, and quote unquote in this case it would be the churches. Moving on further, the Italian influence had been very, very strong on southern Germany, particularly in certain parts, right? Uh, and other than that, and which had a big influence on how the buildings were erected, and specifically when we talk about the churches, how they were designed, how they were kept, how they were made. Moving further, during Romanesque era, Germania was very prominent among the European nations as a place where this architecture had flourished. As you can see that on this slide, um, I've shared a tiny map which shows Magna Germania. That was the Latin name for it, and that is how it came to be known as Germania, and that was the place where Romanesque architecture had really flourished during that era. Now, the defining features. Aarti, can I speak to you? How can I get rid of this ribbon over here, Aarti?
Yes,
Is
which
it
ribbon? I
which
don't see it.
shows you don't see any ribbon? So I guess that is only on my side.
Okay.
Oh,
Oh,
okay,
there is
all
a
right. Huh?
bar, but yeah, it's not on my side.
Okay, okay. Because if I were to move it, I wanted to actually, normally we can just close it, but it doesn't, it is not getting closed here. And I'm not also able to shift it. Okay, anyways, let us move on further. Now, the defining features of German Romanesque, was they used a lot of thick walls. They used a lot of arches. Aarti, I can hear some noise. Can you
Oh,
please
excuse.
mute? Yeah, yeah, thank you. So they used a lot of thick walls, arches. We had sturdy piers. We and other than that, we had buttresses were used, and towers were used, and then we had these arcades, decorative arcades that were used. So that was that. These were a few of the features. If you can look at this image that I'm sharing with you, this is of the St. Peter's Dome or the Worms Cathedral in Worms in southern Germany. Now, this particular building, this particular cathedral, is one of the most prominent examples of the Romanesque architecture in Germany, which is, which has been retained till date. As you can see, the sturdiness of the very structure. It contains arched windows, big walls, massive walls, which tiny with tiny openings here and there, and which are generally arched. If you can see my cursor moving, you can literally figure out how arched the windows are, right? And these were the features which actually belonged to that era, and any church that was being constructed at that time, it followed these Romanesque features, right? Arches and openings in Romanesque architecture. Arches were semicircular, and then, of course, the windows were also semicircular in shape. The doorways were typically enclosed by semicircle arches. Buttresses. Now, buttresses, these were definitely used, but they belonged more to the next era, in architecture, than to this one. But definitely, they were definitely being used. These are massive, the buttresses are generally a flat square profile. It has a flat square profile to begin with, and it is more like it was used more in cases of ceilings, right? And then, of course, these towers, these turrets are there, these towers are there. Now, that was also very typical of the Romanesque feature. I guess this one image talks a lot about, it speaks about all of those, which were all of those features of the Romanesque architecture. Moving to the next slide, take a look at this. This is the interior of the Worms Cathedral. You can see the use of arches on the inner side also. Look at the ceiling. Look at this, this arcade that you can see. You can see the use of arches. Arches were one of those most prominent features of this architecture style. Moving further, another one that we have, as a very big and a very massive example of Romanesque, is the Maria Larch Abbey in the southwestern shore of Larcher Sea. That is the Lake Larch near Andernach in the Eifel region of Rhineland-Pfalz in Germany. Now take a look at. I've used two images on the same slide. One is the exterior and one is the interior of it. Again, the use of these turrets is there. Use of arches is definitely there. And one more thing that you have to appreciate here is, and that is the clarity of the shape, the clean style in which the buildings are constructed. That clarity is there in Romanesque architecture form. Something that will go missing, something that will get that will not, I would not say it would go missing, rather I would say it would get replaced by a lot of ornamental designing of churches and of other buildings of the coming up architectural form, right? But over here, what we have to appreciate is that that the very shape is very clean in its design. It's very clearly visible what form, what shape has been used where, both in the interior as well as in the exterior. Moving further, we have another. Now over here, now this is an aerial view that I'm sharing with you. Right, this is the Church of Saint Maria in the capital district in Cologne. Now, something that is very interesting about this particular building, this particular cathedral, is that it has a trifoil apse. Now, take a look at this aerial view that has been shared with you. You see the one that is colored in white, which is highlighted in white. Now, this was another, they that was about being creative with the use of arches and apses. What you see here, where my cursor is moving, these circular these circular parts of the building, these are called as apses. And in this particular cathedral, these three apses have been used together. Right. So that is why this particular cathedral also comes up as one of the most, widely seen examples of Romanesque. Moving further, take a look at the interior over here. This is the interior of the same church, of the same church. uh, uh, Take a look at the way it has been decorated. Again, the interior makes use of arches, very lavishly, and it has got arches also over here, which you can see in ornamental form where my cursor is moving. Right, so the interiors also have a very clear design to look at. Now, this is something that one cannot help appreciating in the Romanesque, architecture, because as we move on further to Gothic, to Baroque, to Rococo, you will see more of, various designs get juxtaposed in the interiors as well as on the exteriors of the buildings, and that make the clarity, the purity of the design vanish in the coming ages. Moving further, now we enter the Gothic architecture. I'm sure that we all are pretty much aware of what Gothic is. Anybody who can talk about what Gothic is? I'm asking the participant, the listeners over here.
Would somebody like to respond to the speaker?
I'm sure everybody has heard about Gothic music or has heard about Gothic novels. Okay, that's all right. See, Gothic architecture, again, this is the form of architecture that again belongs to the medieval era, right? Because see, the Middle Ages, they had three phases: the early Middle Ages, the middle, the middle Middle Ages, and then we had the later Middle Ages. So Gothic, again, Gothic is a form of art which developed during the Middle Ages, and architecture was beautiful architecture, as you can see here. The Kielner Dome. I'm putting up the image of the Kielner Dome. Moment, yeah. Which is the largest, Gothic church that we have today in Northern Europe. I would want you to spend 1 or 2 seconds over here to look at how the church has been designed from the outer side, on its exterior. Look at those pointy, the pointy roofs that are touching the sky. Everything is very different from what it was in the Romanesque period, right? The term Gothic actually refers to the style of medieval art that developed in Europe in the 12th century. It was a stunning contrast to the Romanesque, the blocky, earthbound style that preceded it. Okay, so Romanesque was more about the clarity of the design. It used blocks, it used arches. It was very different. It was in complete contrast to what Gothic had to offer in the 12th century. Unlike the massive stonework and the heavy walls and few windows in Romanesque, Gothic style had something positive to add to it. It headed in a very different direction, and it was it went skywards. It aimed skywards. It was very pointy. Okay, you can see it. It's all very pointy over here. Even the windows, look at all of these. Everything is very pointy. It reaches the sky as if. And so, and of course, during this time, churches were the buildings that were built the most, because once again, when we talk about the Middle Ages, religion was at its epitome, right? Religion was institutionalized. It was one such part of our life that controlled the rest of the lives, and therefore architecture again focused on buildings that were associated with the religion. And here, quote unquote, it is talking about the churches. Now advances. Now in case of the Gothic architecture, there was one change that was made. We had this. There was this idea of flying buttresses that was introduced through the Gothic architecture. Now flying buttresses are nothing else but these are external arched stone structures, okay, which are jutting out of the walls, and they support the rest of the structure, and they are soaring in height. Okay, they let the building go higher up, right? And the interiors were more light filled. Now take a look at the next image that I've got to share with you. This again is the exterior. The term Gothic, I've just given you a very short introduction to this. The term Gothic refers to the style of medieval art which was in contrast to the Romanesque, right? And now moving further, take a look at the interiors of it. The interiors of the Gothic architecture, as you can see, I'm sure you all are able to see the the glass stained windows, the glass painted, the painting over here, the stained glass windows are there, and which are massive, right? They again are very tall in their designing, right? Arches have been used. Of course, arches have always been a part of it, okay, and they surge upwards, right? But they became more illuminated because of the stained glass art that was used. It let in more of light. Hmm? Now moving on further, take a look at this. The Gothic architecture flourished during the high and late medieval period in Holy Roman Empire, and the Gothic style first developed in France territories that also constitute the modern day Germany, and then the modern day Germany, adopted the French Gothic style and developed a regional distinction of its own to this. Now take a look at this, the interior of this church over here. The interior of the famous Freiburg Minster of Freiburg in Baden-Württemberg, right? Uh, it's very different from what the Romanesque had to offer. It's very different from what the Romanesque had to offer. It's more ornamental, I would say, right? And the design has definitely gone in for a change. It's also because of these glass windows, these painted glass windows that you can see. That makes the church's interiors even more. They are more they to look at it's more mysterious, I would say. Moving on further, and take a look at this. Now, I'm also sharing the picture of a gargoyle at the Freiburg Cathedral. See, Gothic, when it comes to Gothic, I'm sure you all have already got an idea of, the word Gothic is often used in synonym with something that causes fear and scare. Something that is not very pleasant. You know, So look at this gargoyle at the Freiburg Cathedral. So Gothic was everything about using such motifs, such images, such designs, such such architectural wonders, which were very different from Romanesque, right? And at the same time it also very clearly show it also very clearly gave us the idea of what Middle Ages was all about. The dark ages, it is the Middle Ages are very often also referred to as the dark ages, and the reason was, as I said, the lack of information, the lack of education, the lack of any kind of scientific attitude, uh, as a result of which whatever they came up with in their design also, that represented the dark ages, right? But what I find the most beautiful thing is this stained glass window. These are a few samples of it put together for you people to take a look at. These have been taken from Freiburg Minster Cathedral's, site, and how beautifully they are done, and how colorful they are. And you can imagine that when the sun shone through them, how lighted up the place would be from inside. Is there a message coming? Okay, moving
No,
further.
no. Yeah,
Okay,
please go ahead.
okay. All right, moving further now. Take a look at these. These are where my arrow is moving. These are the flying buttresses. Where my arrow is moving, these are the flying buttresses, and these were used as a support for the extended architecture. It let it go higher up, it let it stay sturdy. You can see how different it is from the Romanesque, right? It is ornamental in a different manner. It is very ornamental in a different manner. It literally discarded the plainness of architectural design, and it went in for something that was more complex, that was more that basically kind of also leaves you a little uncomfortable to with that thing in your mind, that, well, I'm enjoying looking at the place, but it is also very disturbing in its shape, right? I would say, because Gothic was Gothic era is famous for that. Now, the Gothic style in Germany, as I said, it basically came from France, okay? And the first major German Gothic work was the Strasbourg Cathedral, that was built in the second half of the 13th century. Right? It is in Alsace region, which is now actually a part of the present day France, but it was once upon a time a part of Germany at that time, right? Uh, See, now one more thing that you have to understand about the architecture in Germany. Things were, architecture took lots of time to get completed. The buildings, they took a lot of time to get completed. Okay, it was not something that could be done within a few months, or within a few years. Sometimes it took so long that the whole design form, or the form of architecture, had undergone a change. Now I'm giving you an example. I'm letting you know this, because when if you would look at the images of the Strasbourg cathedral, when the construction was started, they began it in Romanesque style. Okay, but then they incorporated Gothic elements in it. Elements in it, and these cathedrals could take decades to build. These cathedrals actually took decades and decades to build, and many a times, one could see that a cathedral's building was left incomplete, because it was constantly under construction. It was constantly under construction, to the extent that the time period taken would be so long that the era of architectural form would change over the time. So one can also very safely say here that whenever you get a chance to visit Germany, and whenever you get a chance to look at these cathedrals, which to my mind, churches in entire Europe are something not to be ever missed. Some people would say, well, they all look just the same to us. Well, they do look just the same to a person who's not looking at them from the eye, from the perspective of somebody who's trying to study the design, the interiors of it. But you would definitely notice that the same building would have different elements, different components, which would show it is actually an amalgamation of different styles of architecture. It could have, like, the Strasbourg cathedral was started with Romanesque style of architecture, but then the Gothic elements, the Gothic components were included in it, and it took decades to get completed. So over the time, if any other style of architecture got introduced, or the person who was in charge of taking care of that, of the building of that, or the construction of the building, got influenced by another form of architecture, another form of interior designing, right? That person would include that one also. So yes, definitely, one cannot pointedly say that a specific building, a specific cathedral belongs only to one style of architectural form. Now, perpendicular. Now, this, in Gothic period, that something that is very interesting to be seen is it's very perpendicular. Okay, and the reason, and over here, I'm going to talk about this English Gothic architecture also. It basically, the reason why this happened was because of the emphasis on the vertical lines. And it was in the mid 16th century that people started, they liked it more, the vertical lines, and that is how everything went in perpendicular, direction. And the perpendicular style, I'm sorry, my just a second, please. There is an error that has occurred. Okay, I'm back. Right. The perpendicular style actually grew out of the shadows of the Black Death, a disease that killed approximately half of population, specifically in UK. Right. And it happened to dramatically impact every aspect of our society, and that also included art and architecture, right? And so the epidemic, and the designers say, because of the time, the kind of time that the society saw at that time, people moved away from any kind of, you can say, any kind of vibrance in designs, and they moved towards something that was more, that showed more of labor, that reflected that people were toiling, they were suffering, they were going through a tough phase of life, and that also showed in their architecture, in their art and architecture. We have to remember one thing. I mean, you people come from different fields of study, and I'm sure that you already know this. You are very much aware of it, that whatever phase the world goes through, it has an impact on everything, on every aspect of life. I can very easily relate it to the current time that we are going through. We are going through a pandemic. Our lives have changed forever. Our ideas regarding how we used to live in the pre-corona times, they have gone for a toss. Everything has changed, and we are more we the very era that we are going through is also going to have an impact on every other aspect of our life, whether it is our literature, whether it is our architecture, whether it is our art, whether it is what we study, whether it is how we live, the kind of clothes that we wear, the kind of food that we eat. Yes, whatever our society collectively suffers through, it definitely has an impact on what on every aspect that is connected with our lives. And art and architecture is definitely a very, very important part of it. And that is why the Black Death, At that time, it had an impact upon how people visualized the homes, the buildings in which they occupied, and how they wanted them to be designed. Right? It had an impact on the psyche, which is very true. We are going through a similar kind of era now. Now take a look at this. This is, the interior of the church that I just showed to you. How different it is. You can take a look at the arcade over here. You can take a look at the aisle, which basically also showcases those stained glass windows. Moving further, now we move over to the Baroque. Now, what is Baroque? Baroque arrived in Germany. Uh, you know, it was the arrival of Baroque had a lot to do with the time that Europe went through. There was this a war between the Catholics and the Protestant factions for 30 years, and the arrival of Baroque was actually a result of that. Take a look at this beautifully spanned out image uh, over here, and these are the interiors of it. Now you can see how different these interiors are from the interiors of a Gothic building, of a Gothic architectured, cathedral. The use of color is there. It is very ornamental now. Actually, I can say it is colorfully ornamental, right? It's like a splash of colors in comparison to what we saw in Romanesque and what we saw in Gothic, right? And it is more lighted up. As you can see, the windows over here, we have gotten rid of the stained glass windows over here. In fact, instead of that, we have plain windows, which are letting out clear light into it. The use of colors, the use of gold color, the use of color as in the gold color is there. It is Baroque basically is also about jubilation. It was also about how happy the people were feeling, and that is what they wanted to showcase through their architecture and through the interiors of that architecture. Now, moving on further, this is another example. This is a Swinger Palace in Dresden, right? Take a look at this. The very image now it just shows how different it was made, from the Gothic architecture. This is another form of it. Take a look at how arches have been retained. Arches have always been a very important part of the European architecture in general, right? The only thing is that how they are used in the architecture, how they got used from starting with Romanesque, and how they were used in Gothic, and how they were used in Baroque. Only that has changed, but definitely the use of arches. And if you would only look at, I mean, India was a British colony for such a long time, and the colonial architecture that India has today, even that I'm sure that you can see the use of arches in that. Now take a look at this. It's the interior of that part of the church, which is more of a museum, right? So look at the vases which are placed over here. Again, it's very vibrant and very flamboyant. This is Würzburg residence in Würzburg. Okay. Uh, Again, as I would keep on emphasizing upon, take a look at the style of windows that have been used, right? Windows of all shapes and sizes have been used over here. These are the entrances to the residence. Again, arched entrances are there. The interiors. Take a look at the interiors of it now. I mean, I don't need to speak much over here. The use of gold color and the use of, a different form of different style of these windows over here, right? It's a four-sided roundel kind of a window, and the arched doorways are there. Uh, it just shows how different Baroque went from Gothic. Now, moving on to Rococo. Uh, Now, here I would like to, give you a small little. I would go back to this previous slide of, yeah, this particular slide. Take a look at, the Baroque style in Germany. Now, over here, its defining, feature is the great exuberance. They were meant to impress and show the power of the church or the king. I'm still on Baroque, okay? Why was it? Why so much of ornamentation has been used? The idea is the beautification is one idea that is definitely there. Another is the material used, the colors used, and the designs that were used. All of that was also supposed to reflect the power of the king, the power of the church, right? And that is how they were made very highly ornamented. Now, regardless of the situation after the long war that was there, there was this use of use of materials in abundance. That means the 30-year long war must have had, I'm very sure it must have had, an impact on the economy of the country, on the impact on economy of various European countries. Nevertheless, because the idea was to show that, well, we are powerful, that is why any material that was used in abundance, like in dark colored marble was used, jasper was often used, then some pieces of ornaments were also used, brass was used in the interiors of the area, and there were plenty of frescoes. You can take a look at this. These where the cursor is moving, these are frescoes, right? Plenty of frescoes were used, on the ceilings, in the interiors of the domes, etc. And then the exterior walls were made up of stone, giving the building a very, very, imposing appearance. The classic construction elements were frontons, okay, arches, of course, were used, columns were used, right? And but all of these, the arches and columns, were also used in Romanesque. They were also used in Gothic, but these were transformed, uh, through fanciful elements. That is how I keep on saying that, do make, when you're looking at these images, please do look how different the same arches are, how differently the same arches, the same columns have been used from how they were used in the Romanesque as well as in the Gothic period, right? Now, when it comes to the plan layout, of this Baroque area, uh, we do again see another important change, the use of ellipses, right? And ovals. The use of ellipses and ovals, they became a part of the component. The new and the new geometry also gave, origin to new forms of, spaces. I request everyone to put their mics off, please. I think some
Yes.
participants are keeping their mics on. Please put your mic off.
Yeah. Please, please mute yourself.
Thank you. Okay. Now, see, the spaces were to be used in dynamic form, in dynamic, styles. The facades of the churches were very voluminous, in the sense there was the elements, the material was used in abundance during this era. Then the French Baroque. had a massive influence on the design and construction of German palaces and noble houses also. So when we come down to Baroque, now they were focusing not just on cathedrals, not just on churches. They were now focusing also on the homes in which the nobility stayed. They focused not only on the palaces but also on the nobility, on the noble homes, right? But nevertheless, of course, the focus was always on the ruler's palace, right? You would have, there would be symmetrical wings would be made. The palace would have various wings. There would be a middle wing, there would be a right wing, a left wing. There would be symmetrical wings which would be there, and then that basically showed the massiveness of the space that was occupied by the king, and massiveness of the space also showcases the power that the king has, right, that the emperor has. So everything in Baroque, everything had to do with showcasing how powerful the people, the kings and the nobility were at that time, and also how powerful the church was at that time. And this they showcase through they showcase through the use of space, through the use of colors, through the use of different kinds of materials that were available, right? And they made a very, very lavish use of it all. Now, moving on further, coming down to Rococo. Now I'll go to the slide. This is Rococo in Germany, right? But we will be, of course, discussing about Rococo in general also. Now, when it comes to architecture, Europeans have always had a very, I would say, very clear ideas about what architecture should be, right? Structures, according to them, and of course, which is also true for any day, any time, in any part of the world. Also, if the society focuses on architecture, the society has those resources to focus on architecture. Architecture, that is structure of the building, has to reflect the function for which the building is being is being made, it is being erected, right? And that is the basic rule of architecture for any civilized society. Today, when we look at our homes, look around yourselves, the kinds of homes that are being built, in our world, they basically they have to be functional. They have to be functional. They have to cater to every need of the human being, right? Every part of the home that we design has a function for which it has to be used, right? It has a role to play in our life, in our way of living, and therefore every building that we are that we are constructing today, it has to have a function. It has to fulfill a certain duty, so to say. Why am I constructing it? That is what is the reason behind it, and what is the target behind it, right? That is the basic rule of architecture. The buildings, they need to fulfill the purpose for which it is being for which they are being constructed. Now, when we come to Rococo architecture, Rococo, again, it is basically, it was an emerging new style which moved away from from churches and from the palaces. It moved towards houses. It moved towards the aristocrats of the society of that time, the nobility of the society. In the early 18th century, the French aristocrats, they stopped socializing in courts and palaces of the kings, and they started living in private mansions. And that is when Rococo came into existence. Now, when you socialize, you're partying. Basically, in today's lingo, we say I mean, socializing is what it is like when you hold a party, when you call people, and there is dance and music, and there are games and whatnot. Now, the French aristocracy of that era, it moved away from celebrating within the courts and within the palaces, and it moved to private celebrations, because they started doing that. They started living in private mansions. You can imagine how rich they had become. So these elaborate party homes were built in a newly emerging style called as rococo, which embraced intricate, ornate, and asymmetrical patterns, as well as sense of light-hearted, whimsical structures also. So one is that now they it was more of, as if you're in that celebration mood, and you were in a celebration mood, and as a result of which you're not looking for any clarity of structure, you're not looking for any clarity of architecture, so to say. So it was you they were you know they were more towards using rococo architecture, architecture for the purpose of partying. Moving further, going to the next slide. This is the same information that I just gave you, right? Now, uh, now Rococo in Germany, when it comes to that, the Germans, they also started partying, they also started wanting to enjoy life. So the German aristocracy also wanted to do the way the French were doing, right? And therefore, Rococo also became very popular among the German aristocrats and the nobility, right? So we have this, there were a few places like Amalienburg, that was a hunting lodge, right? That was built at that time in Munich, and it was actually built for the Holy Roman Empire of and that was, and but then it was transformed, right? And that is how it became one of the places which actually also became an example of the Rococo architecture in Germany. So, the Rococo also used, it used designs around mirrors also. Gold and silver patterns would be used on the walls, right? And in fact, a lot of nature, the natural motifs were also used in Rococo. They would make leaves and flowers and birds, out of the material, and uh, those would be used on the walls, and those would be used in the interiors. Little cupids would be made. So the designs, basically the interiors and the exteriors, both the designing was made very intricate and very complex, right? And but even though it was very frivolous, it was very whimsical of them to have used materials so lavishly, uh, but it was overall, it was very lively. It made the place very lively, and that was a part of, that was the very reason behind it. The reason was to enjoy life, right? So your homes and the architecture of the homes, and in the interior and the exterior designing of the homes had to be in tandem with your purpose, right? And the purpose was to have get-togethers, was to call people, was to have a good time, was to have a gala party time, and that is why the places were also made in the same manner. Now moving on towards now the next one, and this one would be my last one. This is the neoclassical architecture. The neoclassical architecture actually, you know, hmm, The neoclassical architecture was actually a reaction against the excessive ornamentation of baroque and rococo architecture, right? Now there comes a time, this was the time when the architects, when the architects of that time, they wanted to move away from this ornamentation. It was not anymore seen as a classy thing. It was not seen in good taste. And they wanted to go back to the Greco-Roman style of construction, of designing the interiors, right? So they moved away from this excessive ornamentation, excessive designing, excessive use of material, excessive use of color. And as a movement, neoclassicism sought out to recreate the style and order of the ancient Greece and Rome, right? Uh, Now, what actually had set the scene, right? The American and the French revolutions, they changed the world, and then these new extended ideas, and with these revolutions, uh, they changed the whole idea about how we wanted to live again, right? Everything, anything that happens in our world, it has an impact upon how we think and how we wish to live. How do we see ourselves living in the coming era, right? And this also has a big impact on arts, on various forms of art. Now, when I say art, I'm including, art as in plain art, that is your fine art, right? I'm also including architecture. I'm also including literature. I'm also including, different forms of literature. So the happenings in our world, these are life changing happenings, and they also bring about a lot of change in our attitude towards anything and everything that we do. And therefore architecture also gets impacted. The monarchies and the controlling governments of the times, of the past decades, of the past generations, which had adopted overly decorative architecture in the form of baroque and rococo. These were no longer appreciated by people, right, by the masses, and people rebelled, and they revolted against the design, the ideas of how you want to design. They also revolted against that. So architecture, see, architecture is also going to is also a form, is also one of those tools through which you show your presence, right? It is also one of the tools through which the rulers show their presence. Like I said, when we're talking about baroque, we were talking about, they wanted to show how powerful they were, and they showed it through the use of open massive spaces. They showed it through the use of color, of designs, of interiors, right? So when it came, then after these revolutions had already changed our world, the people also were undergoing a massive psychological change, and they revolted against anything and everything that was a mark of the era that was already gone by, right? So they revolted against the design sensibilities of their oppressors also. A return to the classical ideas had, this idea of going back to the classical was already there in their minds, right? Now it had started taking shape in their minds. And once again the ancient Greek and Roman architecture was being appreciated for its clarity, for its purity of design, right? uh, when it comes to German neoclassicism, which is also called as German classicismus, uh, it was based on a desire to regain the design purity of classical antiquity. Okay, this style gained prominence around the mid of 18th century, and its popularity lasted for nearly a century. This style idealized simplicity and clarity over adornment, and was influential to the modernist architects like Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. Neoclassicism had clear differentiation of architectural features using, uh, classical designs, as in capitals, columns, and pyramids. These are various forms which are used in architecture, right? The idea was to move away from that flamboyant style of baroque and rococo, and they wanted to move towards the old Greek and Roman styles. Now, here it is worth mentioning, this person's name has to be shared, Carl Friedrich Schinkel, right? He is perhaps the most well-known neoclassical architect of all times, and he and and this person, he studied architecture in Italy. He studied, the ruins of antiquity through painting also, and he developed a belief, his belief that buildings must be poetic and also they have to have a dialogue with the past, right? So this person, he is responsible for, neoclassicism in Germany. Uh, his take on neoclassicism turned decidedly towards neo-Greek style, and this symbolized the ideas of Greek democracy. Okay. Now over here, I guess I have probably not shared that image with you people. There is a, theater in Berlin, that is Schauspielhaus in Berlin, that was constructed in 1818, right? And that was architectured by Carl Friedrich Schinkel, and that shows his, that shows his idea of neoclassical architecture and his individual, take on the neo-Greek style. This building is also known as a concert house in Berlin, and it has got, he used iconic columns, and he also used motifs in it, okay, and it fuses the classical elements with the new elements. So neoclassical, basically, as the name suggests, it has to be an amalgamation of new architectural ideas and the classical architectural ideas. So, so what did these people do? What did the architects of the neoclassical era do? Was they did not just, reject the old forms. Not that they were rejecting Baroque, not that they were rejecting Renaissance, not that they were rejecting Rococo, not that they were rejecting Romanesque. No, what they did was that they took up the old classical Greco-Roman style of architecture, and they juxtaposed it against their new ideas of architecture, and that is how neoclassical came into existence. And this particular person, Carl Friedrich Schinkel, he was particularly, influenced by the Greek style of architecture. So he brought neo Greco style of architecture much into use while he was coming up with new forms of architecture in Germany, right? Nikolai Kircher, that is the local name of this, and this is actually in Potsdam. One of the most beautiful buildings to be seen once again over there. I'm just sharing the exterior of it over here with you, right? And then we have another one, this is in Dresden, Altstädtische Hauptwache, right? This building you can find in Dresden. So these were some of those, a few examples that I could share with you when it comes to neoclassical style, and of course I have explained to you why at all it came into existence. Now I come to an end of my lecture. Uh, Aarti? Aarti?
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh, Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jaspreet, for taking us through this journey of the evolution of architecture in Germany, right from the Romanesque era up to the new classicism or Klassismus, as we call
Hmm.
it in German.
Yeah.
And it was really and wonderful to get to know not only about the architecture of the time, but also the society of that time and how people thought, what was their thinking process, what was the social reality of a particular era, and how it influenced the architecture of its time. And also, it was really nice to get to know the architectural side of the story, like about the particularities of a given era, how it was in Romanesque, how there was much clarity, as you said, in the architecture of that time, and how it how did it evolve during the Gothic era, and then where it became ornamental, and it and then you also showed us the give the example, showed us the pictures through pictures. You uh, made us relate to the features of those architects of that of those particular time period, and then how the Gothic was more ornamental, and from there you talked about the Baroque. Baroque had more, I guess, more color, more ornamental, and it had more. It was more colorful, and there was much use of gold color in it. And then you talked about how they allowed the light to enter into the space, and that was the beauty of the architecture of that time. And then you moved to the Rococo, and from there you came to the new classicism, where people try to go back to Greek antiquity and try to revive some of the art of the architectural style of that time and weave it
Yes.
into their current temperament, how they wanted to live, and
Yes.
how it could reflect to their life in that period of time. So it was really wonderful to know. I'm sure we all, when if we go to Germany, will somewhere look at the architecture in a new way, and will take, particularly if we are a layman and we have no we are not the student of architecture, but maybe we can develop some perspective and can learn to
Yes.
appreciate the art and architecture of the places and the country, and particularly Germany. So now it's open for the questions. If anybody would like to ask something to Professor Jaspreet Layal, you are welcome to ask. So house is open for the questions now. You can unmute yourself and you can ask, or if you like to put it into the chat, you can also do that.
And other than that, in case you have an
Yes.
observation, you can definitely also make an
Exactly.
observation. I mean, it's
Exactly.
not necessarily a question. I mean, you can
Yeah.
also speak about your experience from anywhere that you have traveled to or you have come across.
Yeah.
Even in India, we are talking about architecture in Germany. I mean, that was because that is what we are trying to. We have
Yeah.
focused upon architecture in German-speaking countries, and I
Yeah.
focused on Germany per se. But one thing is there that architecture anywhere is a reflection of what the society is in a given in a given era. You know,
Yeah.
so architecture has always changed. It will keep on changing in the coming in the coming decades, in the coming times. It will again undergo a massive change depending upon how people see themselves living in that specific era of time, right? So I would really want to hear your observations also. It's not a question,
Yes. Yes.
definitely an observation.
So you can take 1 2 minutes. You can also give your feedback,
Yeah.
observation, comments, yeah, personal experiences if you would like to share.
I hope everybody is there. I see six plus 62 people around this place. I hope
Exactly.
you all were there.
Yes, in the beginning they were around 90.
Yeah.
So, okay, just a second. If not, then I have a question. Like,
Yeah.
like you, I just want to know, like you talked about new classicism and you took us to the
Mm.
journey up to the, like it started in the, you said it really gained the popularity in 18th century and then
Mm.
it lasted for another 100 years. And
Mm.
so that means like up to the end of 1900 something.
Yes, yes, mid
Yeah,
1900s. Mid 1900s it
mid
should be. Yeah.
1900.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. That's right.
And then what is the what is the current trend? What how do you see
Well,
it? Can you
the
really say?
current trend, yeah, the current trend in Germany, thereafter, of course, when we move into, the 20th century and then the
Yes.
21st century, it's more of, I would not really, give any particular, because these names to the trends are given by people who study architecture.
Yes.
I'm just somebody who's looking at the buildings as
Yes.
a student of, as a
Yes.
person who takes interest in looking at the designs. What I feel is that, nowadays, it is a very contemporary, and it's a mixed form. We are into this postmodern era. Obviously, we are into this postmodern era, and the kinds of buildings that are being made, they are very